Hello there. What is going on, everybody? Today I'm going to be answering one of the most commonly asked questions I get about Star Wars Legion, and that's, are we going to get sequel trilogy factions in Star Wars Legion? And, well, the simple answer is, yeah, probably. Probably. Now, this is all speculation on my part, but based on trends and based on a lot of things that we know already to be true, and a little conjecture and a little opinion from my end of this, the whole scale. So I want to talk about that. Just the first question is, are we going to get them? I think absolutely. And the longer answer for that is quite simply, as long as the game continues to do well, more will be added to it. If it starts to really slow down, if sales really start to dip, then we're going to start to see less and less. So that's really the fact that customers are going to drive what happens. We're going to see more stuff as long as the game keeps selling, keeps being popular, and no crazy stuff happens to happen. Just like FFG doesn't lose their license with Lucasfilm or anything like that. So the follow-up question is, well, when are we going to get them? A lot of people think, well, as soon as episode 9 comes out, we're going to see some episode 9 stuff, Rise of Skywalker. Well, I don't think so. I think it's going to be at least 2 years before we start to see Resistance and First Order or any of the sequel trilogy factions in Star Wars Legion because of a whole bunch of different reasons. So you got to look at episode 9 is not the only sequel trilogy property that's going on right now. There's books that are going on kind of in the sequel trilogy timeline. There's also Star Wars Resistance, which just started its second and final season. There may even be more shows that are going on or more books that are going to arise. So after the Rise of Skywalker is complete, there may be a whole lot more that we know. There may be a whole lot more going on in that timeline, but maybe separate from the Skywalker saga. So there could be a whole lot more going on that we just don't know about. And so that's really kind of one of the main things that I think we need to get past at least episode 9 and probably more of Star Wars Resistance, because that show is giving us more of a glimpse into the First Order. And, it's going to allow them, by taking their time, it's going to allow them to avoid basically the pitfall of going too fast, too quickly. I feel like they kind of did that with Star Wars X-Wing, where they wanted to make, as soon as The Force Awakens came out, they wanted to make a lot of this Force Awakens X-Wing stuff, and we saw, just way too much, way too quickly. And I feel like, if they were to do that now, for First Order and for Resistance, as more stuff comes out, and then all of a sudden they paint themselves into a corner, and then power creep becomes a thing a lot quicker because, all of a sudden we thought this was the best ship there was, but then there was a new ship, and so it'd be like the same thing. It's like, if they would have made like sequel trilogy factions right now, we would probably have, we'd probably have a lot of different things, but we'd think, this is the height of power of the First Order, and then something else comes out, and like, it needs to be even stronger than before, and then something else comes out, and it needs to be even stronger than before. And so basically, by waiting long enough to get more of a full picture of all of the different unit types that you might have to choose from, it allows you a better option to scale power and keep things in perspective. For example, First Order Stormtroopers may not be the entry-level core unit. Whereas if they did them today, you'd probably expect for a First Order Stormtrooper to be like that starting, introductory, cheapest core option for the First Order. But we may see a whole lot more of First Order trainees, First Order recruits, First Order initiates or whatever, or even cadets, maybe students who are, part of the First Order but haven't earned their Stormtrooper armor yet. We may dive a lot deeper into like Brendel Hux's training program and learn a lot more about the First Order, and it may turn out that their Stormtroopers maybe their second tier core option, or maybe even their top tier core option. But there's a lot more we can learn about that. And wouldn't it really stink if they made the First Order Stormtroopers really, really bad because they're the entry level, and then come find out there's like 3 more books planned all about like, how Stormtrooper is the most elite. It's kind of like when Obi-Wan says only Imperial Stormtroopers are so precise. And then we're like, but that doesn't synergize with everything else. So I think if you want it to, although, side note, they are actually pretty precise. There's a whole YouTube video explaining all of that and the number of shots, and it's really, really, it's kind of a deep dive, but it's really cool. But regardless of that, I think right now, like with X-Wing, for example, we're still seeing new principal First Order fighters come out. Like the First Order bombers just like showed up in one of the comic books and is also in the trailer for Star Wars Resistance, is going to show up in Star Wars Resistance with the wing kind of going outward. But that's like a staple ship, right? And so shouldn't that have been part of the design process from the beginning? If you're like, I feel like they should have waited for those factions for those games as well. And like the same thing goes for Star Wars Armada. Like, let's wait until everything is flushed out before we even get started with that. So that's what I think they'll do for Star Wars Legion. Besides, there's also a whole lot of stuff we haven't seen yet. And like, if we had them in game already, what would we have? We'd have regular troopers. We'd have a whole bunch of these guys, you know, with this thing, and you know, this would be like maybe like the special forces or something. There we go. Wow. With their broken baton shenanigans, you know, and it would just, we'd have this huge type of power creep. It'd just be craziness. So, yeah, so I basically think it's going to have to take a while. There's a lot that they can certainly do. I feel like the First Order is really fleshed out, which brings me to balance. The First Order is really fleshed out, and the Resistance, I just don't feel like they're fleshed out at all. There's a lot of things I feel like they would have to put into the Resistance's faction, like those sand skimmers we had in episode 8, but that doesn't make sense to me. Obviously, it makes sense because they were in the movie, but they get there and they're like, oh, hey, we can just use this stuff. This is old Rebel stuff. So really, the sand skimmers should be a Rebel vehicle. And the ones that the First Order are using are completely falling apart. So the Rebels should have like high quality functioning sand skimmers. Resistance, those shouldn't be part of the Resistance's army because they just found them and used them one time, you know? So it's like, you know, like there's a little part of me that says, look, you need to hold out until you get, like what did the Resistance really have for their mainstay? Let's see what type of army the Resistance puts together in episode 9. Let's see what type of army, some kind of ground forces the Resistance can really put together, because we haven't seen hardly anything of that. And so, you know, like its balance would be way off, where the First Order has a pretty good amount of stuff already, and we still haven't seen that much. But yeah, that's really what it boils down to. Also, time. While we haven't seen a lot of balance, we also haven't seen a time frame for the sequel trilogies. The sequel trilogy takes place over like, what, 2 days right now? And so there's just not enough time for us to get a big picture. Now, episode 9 will jump pretty far forward, so we're going to be able to see, you know, a lot more, hopefully, at the end of that. But we also need, there's going to be other books. Resistance Season 2 is going to be showing us a lot more. There's going to be a whole lot more in the future to paint a bigger picture of what's going on in the galaxy during this time frame. I just feel like right now is the wrong time to do it. And I think we probably should give it at least 2 more years to have a better picture of balance for new factions, if they're going to do them in Star Wars Legion. Plus, there's so much going on right now with the Clone Wars getting ready to come out. At a certain point, after another year and a half or so, once the Clone Wars factions are totally populated and have a lot of depth and diversity amongst them, and then, of course, meanwhile, the Rebels and Empire have been getting stuff all along also. Now, you're probably going to get to a point where you need to start slowing down production a little bit. But if the game is still hot, I would say about 2 years from now, that makes sense. Hey, we want to keep production going at a good pace, but we don't want to overload the Rebels. Like, how many more core units can you do for Rebels? How many more core units can you do for the Empire once you've exhausted, like, you know, 4, 5, 6 different core options, right? So at a certain point, you're like, well, now is a good time to introduce new factions. So now we can take those existing factions that are built, that are full, that are maybe close to complete. We can slow down to maybe only like, you know, 3 or 4 releases per year for them, while the majority of production goes into these new factions. That might be a perfect time. So I don't think they're going to be doing them anytime soon. But I do have high hopes for when they do eventually come out, because at least as far as the First Order is concerned, I feel like they have a lot of diversity. We've seen those Executioner troopers, we've seen Riot Control batons, we've seen Flame troopers, we've seen First Order stormtroopers normally, we've seen sergeants, like Battlefront 2 has a lot of options. You've seen the Ice troopers, and we've seen Sith troopers, we've got Praetorian Guard, of course we've got Kylo Ren, General Hux, officers, pilots, the whole gamut. They have really flushed out that faction. Resistance, not so much, but I can definitely expect we'll see a lot of things that are very similar to the Rebellion, and that's another fear, is that the Resistance might end up being way too close to the Rebellion. They might even go a different direction and somehow allow Resistance and Rebellion to work together to kind of, because Resistance, at least in episode 9, is using a lot of old Rebellion stuff, it looks like. So that's certainly an option. Maybe they'll take very, very drastically different directions with these. Or we may see a New Republic faction, which would be hard to really delve into in episode 9, because, well, the New Republic is no more. But that will be something that really relies more on books and other, you know, ulterior movies and TV shows that take place in between 6 and 7 to kind of show off 30 years of what the New Republic was able to put together. And maybe the New Republic will be its own faction. I don't really see that happening. I feel like New Republic / Resistance would be like the same faction. But there's also sub-factions they can deal with within these. There's a lot of potential. I just don't feel like they're really there yet. And I think it's going to be a long time until they do get there. So that's my thoughts on it. I get asked this all the time. And I've talked about it in a couple of live streams, but I thought I would dedicate a video to talking about sequel factions. I think we've got a long way to go until we get there. And it's going to be a good ride because I think episode 9 is going to give us a lot more, especially as far as space battles are concerned. So I think that's going to kind of go a little bit more into Armada territory, and that's also a great thing. You know, if you guys follow me, you know that I do love Armada. But Legion and Armada, both I think are going to have to wait a long time until the sequel trilogies hit them. All right, guys, that's all I've got for you today. I want to thank you all so much for watching. If you like this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. Let me know what you think down in the comments below, and stay tuned for a new giveaway that will be announced very, very soon. I'm thinking some kind of scavenger hunt. So I'm thinking of trying to change it up a little bit. Let me know about that, what you guys think. I will talk to you guys later. I want to thank you so much for watching, and as always, have a great day.